Germany was about a century late to industrializing compared to other countries. Germany was having a power struggle because of the conflict between Prussia and Austria. This conflict caused Germany not to be united. Germany industrialized only after the country united, which was in 1870 to 1871, after the conflict between Prussia and Austria was over. Germany industrialized to improve their economy and keep Germany unified. This way, Germany was able to become stronger. This was how Germany became an economic superpower. The economy that Germany wanted to make stronger and become stronger in was the railroad system to make the trade better. The positive that came with this was to be able to make the railroad system strong enough to be placed throughout the entire country and even to other countries as well. This created a boost in trade because they were able to ship stuff out faster because of the railroad tracks. Social welfare was available after the industrialization. The negatives that came with the German industrialization and the strong economy was that the social and political areas of the country did not grow. Social systems were maintained the same, and a group of rich farmers who had the resources to mechanize were isolated from the working class. The isolation of social classes caused for there to be chaos and riots. The political systems were also kept the same and did not want to take on new ways to release the autocratic ways that they lived. This meant that the people had little to no control over what would happen to them. Since industrialization helped strengthen the coal and steel industry, Germany's economy grew vastly. This was one of the investments that helped Germany the most, since it created a superpower of sorts to be able to not fear other countries and be able to defend themselves. Germany was able to become one of the better countries in the chemical industry. This was an advancement during the Industrial Revolution that created a boost in Germany's appearance to other countries. The coal production increase came and helped increase the economy after Germany was able to take advantage of its coal-rich regions of Ruhr Valley. This helped tremendously with creating a better trade system and better look for Germany.
After the 30 Years' War, Germany was broken up into independent states. During this time, France occupied the Germanic states to try to gain some of the power that they lost. The Germanic elites felt oppressed and started to preach about Romantic nationalism stemming from the Enlightenment period in their written works. It emphasized the primacy of the individual and inspiration therein. The people realized that they were not very different from one another. They decided it would be better for the population if the French rule was no longer there. Independence was the only way. The working class came together to revolt against the French government and unify New Germany. The Germans let all of this newfound power go to their heads, and this led to narcissistic sense of entitlement and supremacy. They felt the ways of the rest of Europe were faulty, and there needed to be a shining example of liberalism and perfection. Imagine a toddler in the midst of the world revolves around me phase. By the 1850s, the German nationalists believed the only way to be heard was through force and started advertising military solutions. It changed from liberalism to authoritarianism. There was very little leniency put forth by the nationalists at this point. They expanded all through Europe with war after war, Franco-Prussian War, Napoleonic War, etc., building a gigantic Prussian empire. Through blood and iron, Prussia attempted to occupy as much of Europe as possible. They wanted to be in the spotlight, so Otto von Bismarck, the reigning aristocrat, asserted Germany as a world economic and military power by competing with France and Britain in expansion and power. The expansion in Africa was an expression of nationalism and moral superiority that was justified by national progression. German nationalism presented itself much like a revolution in that it started with the oppression that the German people felt from the French occupation. After the French influence was no longer a concern for Germany, they wanted to prune the country into an empire. Germany wanted to assert itself as a major power in Europe. A part of both the progression and need for power is because of a fear for Russia. Marxism was dominating Europe, and many of the German hierarchies feared that Russia would destroy German culture with its Leninist ideas. Hitler, a growing power within Germany, believed that Russia stood in the way of Germany's rightful place on top. Russia had a goal to destroy the developing German culture. Germany eventually invaded Russia. Through all the many wars Germany participated in, they made a lot of enemies. The attitude and domination of Prussia caused turmoil in Europe. This led to many countries' anger that eventually became violent. On July 28, 1914, World War I began.
What drove Germany to imperialize was its want and need to create a colonial empire by unifying the German-speaking states represented Germany. At first, they were hesitant to proceed with defending and obtaining new land in Africa as they believed the cons would outweigh the benefit. But as a society, they decided it was best to strive for more power. With the scramble for Africa, Germany saw this as a great way in order to achieve this new status and power. The scramble for Africa started when adventurers like Henry Stanley revealed a sufficient amount of raw materials that could be collected if countries were to improve.
German imperialism helped the Germans in the sense that they stopped French expansion into the Africas and gained some colonies. The African colonies provided Germany with the raw materials they needed that were plentiful in Africa, but not widely available in Europe. This helped the Industrial Revolution of Germany speed up and achieve better things, such as make the first automobiles.
At first, the realization of materials that could be harvested was slow, but after a few nations started, the rest were quick to follow. Because multiple European powers were trying to conquer the land from the natives, some encountered conflict. Germany, all in all, saw this as a way to unify their pre-existing divided nation and strengthen it through the industrialization of the areas it colonized. Colonization was an easy step towards achieving their industrial revolution because not only did they strip the natives of their land, but they also enslaved them for their own use and labor.
There were many atrocities committed to the African natives. There were a few men named Karl Peters, Lothar von Trotha, Hans Dominik, and Jesko von Puttkamer who led the atrocities committed to the natives of Southeast Africa, Togo, and Cameroon. They went in and murdered, tortured, and raped the natives as well as turned them into slaves. They would kill anyone who opposed them, killing off massive amounts of the population of the natives. The Germans succeeded in killing 75% of the population of the Herero and 50% of the Nama tribes. An example of the cruelty that the natives endured is that women had to scalp and remove the brains and flesh of the skull that could have been their friends and family. There was also flogging that once performed between the legs, crush testicles, rip out intestines, and rip apart unborn babies.
With Africa, it really didn't have issues with the indigenous people because they weren't as advanced as the imperialists. The only real conflict that Germany faced were the other European nations trying to seize more land. Since they weren't as powerful as their surrounding imperialistic nations, they decided the best decision was to create allies. Someone who was well known for the effort to avoid conflict was Otto von Bismarck. His goal was to create an alliance with Russia since it was on one front of Germany and they wanted to isolate France. After Bismarck's time leading Germany, the nation was said to become more aggressive. Berlin allowed its treaty with Russia to expire, and once this happened, Russia was forced into an alliance with France.
The imperialism movement into Africa gave way for new research on race studies by going into the burial grounds of the indigenous tribes for skulls and bones to study. These studies were to prove that whites were superior to blacks. They had the idea that whites were naturally superior to blacks, and these race studies helped the German people start to believe it more. There were also studies conducted by Eugene Fischer that measured the physical characteristics and the intelligence of interracial children to prove that they were detrimental to European culture. There was also a change in the culture of these tribes once the Germans imperialized them. Imperialism brought a taste of Western culture into Africa that the natives had never seen before, so there were many that converted and adopted this Western culture for themselves, becoming more educated and intelligent. Some of the natives had also adopted Christianity as their religion, one of which was the nephew of the leader of the Nama tribe. He was a teacher, spoke High Dutch, and carried a Bible with him at all times.
Nationalism was a driving force for imperialism. Germany wanted to assert themselves as a global power, and expansion seemed like an easy way to achieve this. Industrialization gave the rise of nationalism a little nudge by backing up their national pride with technology. If you had a shiny new toy, you'd want to protect it.